Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a personal experience, I guess, at a tough interview situation for a VP's gig, or over 20 years ago now, but also looking at some of the Senate hearings, whether they're confirmation hearings or where the Senate committee is looking for or trying to discover certain information, or maybe an investigation, something like that. Now, when the questioning is particularly hostile, when they're trying to destroy the credibility of the person or the witness, they'll try and focus on a very specific vertical technical matter that is really unrelated to the issue, or minimally related at best. So, Billy Bob, did you notice that there were trucks going down the highway when you came to this hearing? Yes, I did, Senator. So you're a diesel mechanic, are you? Do you have a PhD in diesel engineering? You don't? Well, you're whatever you say is irrelevant because you don't have a fucking degree in diesel mechanics. You're not a mechanical engineer. So you were observing trucks going down the main street. You can't even have an opinion on that because you don't have the qualifications. What the fuck has me being a diesel mechanic got to do with seeing trucks go down the main street, says Billy Bob. Look, Billy Bob, the issue, are you a fucking diesel mechanic or not? Yes or no? Yes or no? So that's the type of sort of, I'm juicing that up a little bit, but that's the sort of questioning that is used to discredit or disqualify. Billy Bob, like anyone, can say whether or not trucks are going up the main street, and it's utterly irrelevant whether Billy Bob's a diesel mechanic or not. I noticed there was another Senate hearing. I think this was a state or regional Senate hearing in the US, and it was someone's opinion on something or other. I think something like one of those drag shows where kids. So the question was, did you see children at the drag show? Yes, I did. Oh, well, are you a specialist doctor in pediatrics? You're not? Well, that's it. What's that got to do with somebody noticing there are kids at a drag show? So these are the sort of questions that are used to, again, invalidate any utterance that the witness or a job candidate may make. And I saw this in and it goes on all the time, so I'm not singling this one out necessarily, but there was a very clearly unqualified candidate for a role in the government department that the Biden administration had put up as and they were going through the Senate confirmation process. Now, they were manifestly unqualified in almost every measurable way, but the clincher and the one that's been doing the rounds on social media and so on is asking the guy some very technical questions, and he, I'll paraphrase here, but do you know how many 1-inch bolts there are on an aircraft engine? And the guy, again, he's unqualified anyway, but he said, well, look, I'm not a mechanic. My job won't be servicing the aircraft. Of course, I don't know how many bolts. So you don't know how many bolts? Is that what you're saying? You don't know how many bolts? Yeah. Well, how many 1/4-inch bolts are there? And again, the guy reiterates, well, I'm not a mechanic, never have been, and that's nothing to do with me anyway. That's going to be. But you might be in a position of 10 levels of management above the mechanic, so you are supposed to know how many bolts in the engine. Well, no, that's a ridiculous question. Now the guy kept on responding. So, well, I'm not a mechanic. Why are you asking these questions? But the questions kept coming anyway, and that was used to illustrate the level of his incompetence or his unsuitability for the role when it didn't indicate that at all. It was simplistic and easy to follow, I guess. But I remember, I've sort of got this in the back of my mind. It took me to an interview I'd been to over 20 years ago. 25 years ago even. I'm being tapped on the shoulder for a gig, and it's just like a VP type gig. And the guy I knew is sort of saying it's a done deal. To turn up for an interview, meet a few people. It's all very congenial, and the coffee's good, and and out come the biscuits and the cookies, and it's all a pleasant chat. And there's the guy I know and sort of, if you like, his supporters. Now, there's actually factional warfare going on at this company, and the guy hasn't told me this. The guy who tapped me, there's factional warfare going on. There's like his faction and the other faction. Now, this turns out this job he's trying to shoehorn me into or steer my way has become like the political battleground between the two factions. Who gets to decide who gets this job? You know, that's now the life and death struggle in the office politics of this company. And he doesn't tell me that. So as far as I'm concerned, the job, you know, it's a done deal. I've got the job and I'm gonna start don't know, a week's time, whatever it was. And but he gives me a call one day and says, look, you know, we're all systems go here. Just want you to come in and meet a couple of people before you start. Now, automatically, if you've been around long enough, which I had been at that stage, automatically that sounds bad. Why, you know, we've already got a done deal. We've already done the handshaking and the backslapping and all the other bits and pieces. So if people want to meet me, they can do it after I've started. So the idea of coming in to meet a few people suggests that there's still some folks need to be won over to the idea. And so my thought is, well, why doesn't he, and he's like the CEO, why doesn't he have control of that? Why isn't he dealing with that? Why am I being fed back into the mincer, you know, type thing to deal with this? But I thought, okay, I mean, it was a you know, fairly prestigious gig. I mean, paid well. But as with most prestigious and well-paying gigs, they tend to be drawn into a patronage machine of one sort or another. This idea that you put an advert out in you know, on the job board or in the local newspaper and hire the best qualified person and take you know, that doesn't happen so much with prestigious, well-paid roles. You want to give it to someone who then owes you with undying loyalty and that sort of stuff. So so anyway, I turn up and it's actually like a panel interview. So there's got to be like fucking 10 people on the panel, and half of them are I don't know if these exact numbers, but it seemed to me that half of them were the you know, the faction sort of supporters of the guy I knew, and the other half were some other faction. And it was pretty clear that this interview and the committee that was drawn out, or the panel interview was, you know, here the battle lines were sort of being drawn sort of right in front of my eyes. And I was annoyed with my, you know, my guy, the guy I knew. Well, I mean, he should have given me a briefing on this. He should have told me, given me the whole thing, chapter and verse, and explained it to me. And if he had, I may even have walked away from it, insofar as even if you get the job, you know you're going to be at war with half the people around you, which can include peers. That means there'll be people who'll be set up to inform on you. You know, everything you do and every decision you make is going to be fed back to someone who's going to try and undermine you. And this went straight into the board of directors. The chairman of the board supports the guy, you know, the other faction, and then there's the CEO who you know, reports to the board, but you know, ostensibly has his supporters within the board. So the whole thing's now this is sort of a you know, senior VP role. You wouldn't think it would be enough to cause such political drama, but anyway, it was. So now the guy, you know, the lead assassin in the other faction, he's the line of questioning that he uses is that there's I'm pretty much, you know, have the necessary expertise across pretty much all of it, but there's one section of the R&D department that is just one guy there who's like a chemical engineer, and he develops some bonding materials like glues and araldites and that sort of thing. So he develops bonding materials and or compounds, I suppose you'd call them, and he does that, and as it's been explained to me along the lines of, look, you know, he's one guy, he does his own thing. It's not by any means a big or major or critical part of the business. We just accept his his chemical engineering come scientific type recommendations about the bond, and then that's the end of it. So, don't worry about that, says my contact. Anyway, I turn up and it's a panel interview, which in itself is an ambush. I didn't know that was coming. I'm completely unprepared for it. And which is probably desirable from the point of view of the other factions. So I'm plonked in the hot seat, and the assassin guy, the guy nominated to be the assassin, who was certainly quite zealous in the way he went about this. He was definitely after a scalp. He said, "Well, Billy Bob, as you know, chemical engineering is going to be part of your area of responsibilities." Now, that's not really true. The senior VP had like an overall operations guy who had an R&D guy reporting to him, and the chemical engineer reported to the R&D guy. So it's 3 or 4 layers of management sort of removed from the position I would have held. So that's not true, that claim. But he then started on some very technical chemical engineering questions. Now, it's clear from the way he'd set the whole thing up, or it had been set up, that he'd gone through my CV and seen that I had no chemical engineering qualifications. And so that was the weak point that they were going to exploit. And so his questions were, what's the chemical formula for such and such when you mix A with B? I don't fucking know. Only a practicing chemical engineer working in that area would know that. Working day to day in that area would know that. No one outside of it would know that answer to that. So he asked the question, and it's got the look in his eyes. Gotcha, haven't I? Gotcha, motherfucker. And I knew from that moment on it was going to be a ridiculous game. So I looked over at my contact, and I could see that he sort of looked away and looked at the ceiling and the floor, and he'd been neutralized, and it's almost like he'd given me up as a sacrificial lamb for some wider cause. And I did think about that, but anyway, I sort of short circuit this, say, look, I'm not a chemical engineer. I'm saying this in front of the 10 of them. I'm not a chemical engineer. I've never been a chemical engineer. I've never worked as a chemical engineer or alongside a chemical engineer doing research work. So I wouldn't be able to answer those questions. Only somebody so qualified could answer a question like that. And so there's no point in pursuing that line of questioning, given that I clearly have no expertise in chemical engineering and don't claim to have any, do not purport to have any. So, I've been offered the role with everybody participating, knowing that I have no chemical engineering exposure. And then I pointed out that how far removed from the position that the actual chemical engineering work would be. But the guy, as if I'd said nothing, had heard nothing, and reacted to nothing, just pursued straight. Didn't even acknowledge what I'd said. Just came straight back with another very technical chemical. Do you know the answer to that? And then it was some sort of acronym about some new form of chemical engineering that had just come out, or some new invention or discovery or something. And I just kept on repeating, I'm not a chemical engineer. That's not my area of expertise. Haven't claimed to be. That this line of questioning is pointless. But again, each time without responding, the guy would come back with yet another technical question. So I said something along the lines of, look, there's really no point in continuing this, as it's achieving nothing and it's gaining nothing, and and it's a tough spot, because you sort of know that if you try and answer questions, you know that they're technical to the point where they're out. So I know I'm not going to be able to answer any of them. So then they have the scalp saying, look, we answer these questions, you know a single one, no, that type of thing, or you just push back and become a little bit, I suppose in interview terms, a little bit impertinent, where you just say, hey, stop the stupid question, you dickhead. But that doesn't help either. So either way you go, you're sort of cornered on this one. And given that my contact wasn't prepared to intervene, if others had jumped in and said, look, that this question is stupid, like members of the panel, then I probably could have navigated through it. But given they sort of left me to to be hung, drawn, and quartered by the assassin. Then there was nothing there. But it goes to show that the guy, the sole purpose of the line of questioning was to disqualify me from the role. But it was quite erroneous and quite pointless. And I noticed that same tactic. I mean, it's an effective tactic, so why wouldn't other people use it? But we need to see these things for what they are: a deliberate, premeditated attempt to discredit, delegitimize, character assassinate somebody with issues that are unrelated. So I remember there was a thing of mass graves that was found, many years ago by somebody. I think it was like an archaeologist or something had found these mass graves 30 or 40 years ago, and so he was being questioned about it. And so the question was, look, are you a medical doctor? Well, how do you know that they're the bones of people? Like a ridiculous question like that. But as a gotcha question on camera, they're still, silly though they are, still quite effective. You've been with Tacitus today, you're effective. You've been with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.